one of the most dominant races in the history of the championship. Mitch Evans wins in Mexico City. Yeah! Mitch Evans through the final corner to win the Romy Prix for Jaguar.
This is how it's done, mate. Superb drive.
Hello and welcome to Recharge at Home, Jaguar Racing's podcast, keeping you up to date with what's going on whilst we're all, unfortunately, in lockdown. And I'm delighted to say that this time I'm joined by two engineers, both of whom are very familiar to all of you. Josep Roca, Mitch's race engineer, and Cristina Manas, performance engineer for Mitch. Welcome both of you. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
So, first of all, to both of you, and Josep, you can go first. Just how did you actually become a race engineer?
My career started pretty much straight out of uni. I joined a small race team back in Spain, where I started off as a bit of an apprentice race engineer somehow on local championships. So I did, and I worked my way up during race engineering for touring cars, all the way up to European level. I think it was at about 2011 time that I had the opportunity to join Williams Formula One. I'm still working for Williams as we are the technical partner for Jaguar Racing. But within Williams, I was completely away from racing for 5 years, up until when the project of the Jaguar Racing Formula E project actually started, and I was given the chance of just go back, and I obviously took it.
And Cristina, what about you?
Yeah, so, I've got a lot less experience than him, even quicker than that. But yeah, I started right out of uni. It was actually another Formula E team, so most of my experience is Formula E related. And what I was doing for them, it was most simulation based or factory. And then from there, I joined Williams as well, the technical partner. And it was a similar role, so it was also quite a lot of simulations and wasn't going racing up until last season when I joined them as a performance engineer and kind of slightly changed my role into what I'm now.
Now, we're used to talking to both of you, and people who are familiar with our channels will recognise the two of you, but can you just explain what the difference is between a race engineer and a performance engineer, Josep?
The race engineer is the main point of contact with the driver and with the team. It's a bit the central comms point for everyone. So, I obviously have a big technical input on what's happening with the car, but it's a bit more of a kind of project manager role where I have to understand everything that's happening and make sure that we execute things at the track to maximize all the areas, whereas Christina's job is a bit more focused. I can let her explain it.
Yeah, no, I think he's right on that. I think outside a race weekend we do similar things, but might say on a race weekend I mostly focus on data and understanding what's going on in the car, and he makes sure that everything else is flowing. So he's dealing with mechanics, driver, his engineers, he's putting everything together and then making the show go.
So how important then is it that the two of you work really well together, Josep?
It's really important because obviously there has to be complete trust with each other because there's no time or no point on duplicating work. So as we were saying, what I get different people's input. Cristina's input is very, very important on what's happening on Mitch's car because she tunes the different parameters that help us go quicker. So it's really important that we talk the same language all the time, that we both interpret what Mitch is telling us that he needs, and that we, within what's available in the car, that we turn that into what's needed to go a bit quicker, to recover a bit more energy, to ultimately deliver a better result of the race weekend.
And by sheer coincidence, you're both Spanish. Do you actually, when you're talking to one another, technically, do you talk in English or do you talk in Spanish? Or do you talk in both?
I'd say probably both, isn't it?
It's a bit of both. We try to keep it to English so everyone else can be involved. But it depends on the time. During the race weekend, during the event, everything is English because everyone's input is needed and there's no benefit on isolating ourselves from the rest. And obviously Mitch doesn't understand Spanish, so he's a big part of the of the conversations.
We talk about developing cars, and you do a lot of testing prior to the season starting, certainly when you're developing. What are the types of thing that you are developing and testing? And generally, what are the timescales involved in doing the development, Josep?
So that can change a bit from one season to another. Especially there was a big difference when we went to the Gen 2 car, and when we go to the Gen 3 car will be, again, it's a bigger development year. But a normal, so now from season 6 to season 7, let's say that the regulations don't change, so the car will not change a lot. Normally the time scale is, we try to have the next year's car ready by April time, so April, May. Right now our car is ready to go testing, but we obviously can't do it. You normally structure your testing on proving concept and reliability straight away. So if you've changed a lot the basics of what you had, we have 3 main components that we can work with, but you can be conservative and evolve what you already have on the current season, or you can make big steps and try different directions on more extreme materials, concepts, designs, and that's what you focus on the very first phase. So as soon as the car is running, you want to make sure that your new concept is working, that mechanically is sound, because if you need to make any changes, normally those are big items that have a big turnover time, so it takes a long time to make a new version of it, and you want to obviously have the new version, if it's needed, with enough time left before the homologation time. Normally homologation has to be frozen. It was just before September. I think it was last year was the last week of August that we had to submit all our documentation, all our features. The FIA had been over to inspect our powertrain, so that's normally the window we can work on our development car. That's from April time till August.
But when you talk about the 3 main concepts, will you start? I mean, obviously, depending on the regulation changes that you're going to have that year. So, would you naturally look at every single part, or would you make a choice and you'd say, right, we're going to prioritize this and we're going to modify this? How does that work?
Every design or every direction you take is normally about making decisions to take compromises. So probably the best motor in the world will have a certain shape, dimensions and weight to produce the best efficiency possible, but within those parameters, maybe the weight you will not be happy with, because obviously we have a weight that we have to operate with, and then that constraint starts shrinking the motor. Then when we look at the gearbox, there's different ways you can solve your gearing from the motor to the drive shafts and to the wheels. So then you'll be looking at different solutions. The optimal might be what's called a single mesh, so just one interface teeth interface between the output of the motor to what happens at the differential. But again, that might be too big and might not fit, or might become too heavy. So you are always iterating within the different parameters of the different components to find something that you're happy with, as in, okay, I want this level of efficiency from the motor, I want to achieve this level of interaction within the gearbox so that it produces less losses, and my inverter will be this size because the type of components that are available now on the market or that we're pushing to develop new components into the market are now at this size. You put it all together, if the weight is still what you want, then normally that's what you go with. Otherwise, you have to reiterate and take another round of compromises until everything works out, basically.
So where does it start? Does it start with trying to decide a weight? Does it decide with, I mean, which is your start point, or isn't there one?
The weight is definitely a starting point because that's given. So big part of the car is standard from Spark. So there's only a limited mass that we can play with, and it's also constrained to a location. So it's all at the back of the car basically. With that and the Rex, you're left with about, I think it's 115 kilos roughly that you can play with. And that includes all your rear suspension and the full powertrain, plus structures. So that's your starting point. Then depends on what your knowledge on the different components are. Sometimes you have to start with a partner until you can bring it completely in-house. Some teams never do everything in-house. They always work with partners. That just adds more constraints to the puzzle, to put it somehow. Because if a supplier has developed a motor that's certain shape, you can only tune it to an extent. The same with the gearbox, and then you have to find the way to get the three main components, as I was saying, to come together, package and to be within weight, and hopefully achieve the performance numbers that you were aiming for.
And presumably, okay, so you've now developed your optimum package, you think, certainly on paper. You then actually go testing. So how important is it? Obviously, testing is therefore very important, but also now you've introduced another variable, that being a racing driver who, you know, their job is obviously to drive quickly, but they also need to be able to communicate with you and feedback and follow presumably instructions. So Cristina, how does that work when you're then trying to sort of pull data with a variable that maybe is unknown?
Yeah, so that's really a great skill to have in racing drivers, to be able to also say, okay, today testing is probably not about being the quickest out on track, but is to give the guys as much info as I can of what's going on. Because yes, then we have all the data and we can go through it, but really on a test day you do generate a lot of phases. So if you have the driver there that can at least steer you already on where to look at next, it's certainly a lot easier to then for us to go on the data and understand what the trends are. If we have him telling us where to start, it makes things definitely easier.
And how does that work with the driver? You know, drivers inherently want to go fast. So, I mean, you know, you're asking a driver not to do what it is the driver wants to do. So how does that work?
Yeah, I don't know. We try and keep them motivated throughout the day. But yeah, I do reckon just from outside that probably sometimes it gets a bit boring for them, just because probably they fancy doing something else and you have to be iterating around something specific that day that you want to understand very well. But he doesn't probably, no, he's probably not looking at doing that for the full day. But I guess at the end of the day they understand it. Although it might not be the day they enjoy the most, they understand that that's then going to have benefit for them when they're actually racing all their cars in a few weeks' time or whatever. So in the end they do that compromise and they know that there is something behind that. There's a reason why we want to spend those painful days doing that.
Josep, you're the poor guy who's generally on the end of the doing the talking to the driver.
Yes, that's me. I guess it's worth adding to the development or the private testing process, something that we also get out of it is the relationship with the driver and the relationship and the training of the driver actually. Because a big part of what we do on private testing is obviously develop the car, develop features, take the directions and explore areas that we think will help us when we get to the street tracks. That things are normally quite different to the conventional tracks that we can, or relatively conventional tracks that we can test in. And I think it's really important and a really good thing that we have with Mitch, that he's been doing. Well, the last few years he's been in the team, he's done a lot of testing with us, and every single feature or new feature that we've put on the car, he's been part of. So he understands it from the driving side as well as we do from the technical side, or as well as Cristina does from the technical side. I just get the middle message and try to to manage my best. Try my best to manage. But Yeah, it's really important that when we talk about certain feature that will help you when you have this problem on braking, that he's experienced the pain that Cristina was saying, that we've gone the full swing one way, another, now we're locking front wheels, now we're locking rear wheels, oh, now it works. What did we do also from the driver's side to actually get there? So if we ever get the same problem, he will have experienced what it takes to make it right. So I think that's also really important on the cycle that we go through every year. It's not only about the hardware that hopefully we don't have to modify much, and normally it's an iteration and a half and you get there. But it's getting ready for the next championship that will start, and get everything working together is ultimately what you need for a race weekend.
I guess actually this also helps the driver, this process, because it helps build trust. Because particularly when you're going to street circuits that are new, they've obviously done a simulator, but the nature of a Formula E weekend is that they have to be on the pace from the very word go. Trusting in what you are telling them, I suppose, helps get them on the pace quicker. Do you think?
Yes, absolutely. It has to be mutual trust, because a bit like what we were saying earlier, that sometimes the feedback you get from drivers, or if the driver's only trying to go quick, maybe not be paying attention to what's actually happening and will not try to understand the problem. I think what we've got with Mitch is that the trust is mutual. So we've been, and the three of us, Cristina, Mitch and I, have been working together for quite a long time now. And when we talk about a particular problem, we all understand the direction we need to take, or to try next, to try to fix the problem pretty quickly. And that's definitely what you need on a Formula E race weekend. There's no time to explore or time to test different things. Yeah. You have a problem, you have to fix it and move on to the next problem that will come very quick.
To give you an idea on how quickly things have to happen, sometimes on a race weekend, sometimes the driver is still out on track just doing a sin lap and he's already telling you this is not working. And sometimes you really go by, okay, then we already have in mind, as soon as the data comes in, we know what we have to look at first, because these were already giving you feedback on what he thinks is going on in the car. Because otherwise you'd have to download the data, have a look at it, and almost by then you have to get ready, go out again. So we really need the drivers to be able to have a feel of what's going on in the car and give us that hint on what could be, to guide them as quick as we can.
So you've decided to change a setting. Whose idea would that be? Would that be Josep's, or would that be Cristina's, or would that be the driver's? And then how does that get communicated amongst you two, the driver, and then of course the mechanics, who are the ones doing the actual spannering?
I guess when we propose something, it is at the end is not necessarily someone's call. So we always have a chat together, saying, okay, if we have time to have a look at the data, a few of us, if it's, well, depending what is it about, then myself and someone else from maybe controls or powertrain, depending on what it is, would have a look at it, and then we'd discuss, okay, we think it's this, do you agree? And we'd just have a brief chat about it, and then we'd also discuss it with Josep. So once there's been an agreement on, okay, we think we can maximize the chances, if it's not completely clear what's coming from, we can maximize the chances of understanding a bit more what could be behind by trying, as Joseph said, this setting on the car. If there's any change to be made, either software-wise or mechanically, then mechanics or myself will make a change, and then Joseph would transmit it to Mitch, saying, okay, we might think it's related to this or that, to give him in the loop of giving him a bit of feedback or what we think is going on, and then we'd be back out.
What are the unique challenges that you actually face when you go to a street circuit, and particularly when you go to a new track? So what's the data that you are most keen to get your hands on? So, maybe what's the first bit of information that you really need to know?
I guess as a team, what's really important is how well, when it's a new track, it's really important for us to understand how well that track resembles what we had in the simulator. Because quite often, although we spend a lot of effort on trying to get the tracks to be as accurate as possible, we get information from companies that come and do scanning of the actual surface and to produce the best possible track model. Quite often, when it comes to the real event, there's been some construction work happening. The actual track walls are up that were not there, and there's quite often we find big differences that affect a lot of the homework we do pre-event to calibrate our systems in terms of energy saving, on how we do or take care of every corner. Let's say if the track has changed substantially, we have to reevaluate that, redo that. That's why even from the very first lap that we do at the track is very useful for us to start getting what's the distance between one corner to the other, what's the radius of a corner. Then the second one is the feedback we get from the driver on surface characteristics and overall grip. Normally in Formula we start off being temporary tracks. We start off with dirty tracks that have very low grip, so that always has to be factored in. We know we start at low grip and it will improve, but that's important to see if it's low grip as it normally is from the experience we have from previous events, or is it especially low grip at a particular corner because maybe there's a surface that we were not expecting it to be so slippery, and we'll have to start treating things differently when it comes to optimizing performance for that corner. I think those are the first two things that we look at as we start running. And I guess the third thing, because when we are running, everyone else is there already, is where we stand on the stopwatch, and that's ultimately, again, that starts triggering alarms or not. If the track is, a section of the track is difficult, is slippery, is bumpy, it's bumpy for everyone. If we are there or thereabout on lap times, quite often is about, okay, we have to survive this, optimize it, or tune things to deal with the problem as good as we can, but the problem is not going to disappear. Sometimes the range that the car lets us operate just needs to deal with that big bump that maybe will hit the floor a little bit every time, and that's what it is. As long as it's not dangerous, get on with it, Mitch.
So when you go to a new track, do you both sort of have a job list of what you're going to do before you, or even any track, it doesn't even have to be a new one, because essentially your roles are fairly similar in terms of optimizing the performance, but do you divvy jobs up between you, or do you work very much collaboratively together?
Yeah, so every single one of us has a job list. Doesn't matter what track it is, even if you've been on that track a million times, you go through your task list. We just pretty much the same task list, really, track by track. So every time we arrive and go into race weekend, we know from the first day what each of us needs to be doing, and then what we do is almost daily catch-ups with either Josep or myself. We'll have a few of them even per day, but then as the whole team together, we'd also have catch-ups on how things are evolving, changes that we didn't expect going into the race weekend. So yeah, every single one of us has a very well-defined list, so that we make sure that we're not duplicating ourselves onto what we're doing, but we also keep updated with each other throughout the day.
And does the driver just become involved with that from the moment? I mean, I suppose track walk, but I don't know how much the driver has to do. I mean, really can give you input on the track walk. Obviously, they're getting their own reference points. But I mean, at what point does the driver really start inputting with you? Is it when they get behind the wheel?
No, it's earlier than that. So they normally get on the track by Wednesday, and it's not really until Friday normally on shakedown that they get on the car. So up until that point, they do with us the track walk, but also they're part of this catch up. So we might do one ourselves, the engineering team, but we also do one with them so that they know what's going on, if there's been any update, because last time you would have seen the driver, it would have been when he came to the simulator. So that's been either a few days or a week since. So then you'd always update them on what's happened since last we saw you, really.
Now, we talk a lot about setup. Just explain how different tracks differ with setup. So give me like two extremes, if you like, of tracks that we've raced on, high speed, low speed, and what actually that means in terms of setup.
Maybe the two extremes that spring to mind quickly would be Paris and Mexico that we recently were on. Paris is a very short lap, quite short straights, and very slow sections, and very, very bumpy with huge crowning. Some of the corners you even start picking up the inside wheel because of that's the amount of crowning and how far the road gets from the inside wheel as you turn. So obviously the big difference between them two, Mexico's is the highest average speed ever in Formula E, has the highest corner and the highest top speed. So you'd be focusing on different things on those two. For Paris, you need a car that can deal well with bumps, that you are not so worried about drag and affecting your top speed. If you have to run a setup that compromises drag to benefit better braking, better traction, better grip mid corner while you're going through the bumps, that's the place to do it. Whereas in a place like Mexico, where you are at full throttle for a very long time, very long straight, very high speed last corner, that on that kind of track you have to start taking into account drag, because if you lose 5 or 10 kph at the end of straight, that's going to be a big lap time penalty. And you want to keep your driver comfortable on a smooth track that may not need the same settings or the same mechanical setup that you will need on a bumpy and slower track as it can be Paris. I think those from the mechanical and aerodynamic side, I think those are the two extremes and how we would approach it.
Now, I mean, on the basis the Formula E car is a given car that you can't make any changes to the bodywork, what are the setup changes that are going to affect drag?
So there's 3 options of front flap that we can run, 3 being high angle, low angle, which is 20 and 15 degrees, high and low, and the third option is we can take the front flap off. With those you're achieving different amounts of load at the front, which changes how the car handles at high speed, and also reduces drag or increases drag as a consequence of it. And you can also play with your ride heights, making your car run flat or nose up, or adding pitch to help both your mechanical and your aero. So the more extreme the angle, normally the more difficult it is for the air to go around the car, so the slower you are at the end of the straight.
And how much data is actually shared from you guys to the other side of the garage? So are Mitch's and James's driving style very similar? Do you start with the same setup, or do you, once you really get to the track, do you just go down your own route, if you like, with what suits your own driver, Chris?
I think mechanical setup wise, the car are always relatively similar. It can be tuned around certain things on the mechanical side, round the driver a little bit, but probably, and maybe Josep can't correct me if I'm wrong, mechanically wise they are relatively similar, because we don't tend to change loads of things either on the mechanical setup as such during race weekend. There's the other bit that we tune a lot, which is software, and we are on the bolt part, but it's there where it could be more driver dependent. So it's there where we tend to differ. It's not a replicate. The cars don't necessarily start on a Friday 100% same, both sides of the garage. Anyway, the data is shared, so the data is available. I can at any time look at James's data and the other way around as well. And also, as part of these catch-ups that we do all together, we also put in common some of the differences and some of whether, if someone has a problem or something, see what the other car has, if that could give a steer on what could be something to look at, or something different. So yes, they don't necessarily start the same, they're not completely different either, but there is that degree of tunability that is a bit around each of a driver, and that'd be different.
Let's move on to talking about strategy. First of all, do you actually plan a strategy before the race, before you even get to the event? So when does strategy start taking shape?
We always start the race with a plan. The plan depends on the starting position, obviously, and can depend track to track. So we know that there's some tracks that can be very efficiency, can be where efficiency is very important. So every kilowatt hour can produce a lot of lap time, but you can lose a lot of lap time. So you have to really maximize how you use your efficiency. Or there's some other tracks, normally the shorter tracks with shorter straights, like Paris, like Monaco last year, allow you to be more aggressive, as in use energy and don't worry so much, you will not be as exposed.
Strategy then comes as a result of where you've qualified, or does strategy come before you even hit the track for quali?
I think that there's like three main factors. The first one being the energy and lap time sensitivity of the track. The second one would be your starting position, and then the third one is the attack modes and number of attacks, attack mode position, or let's call it the attack penalty, because again, in some tracks there's no real penalty from taking the attack mode; it's only a benefit. So then you don't need to plan it that much. You just see how you're getting on, and when you have an opportunity to overtake, you take the attack and try to overtake. Whereas in some other tracks, you really need to factor in the energy required to pull a gap to be able to attack without losing position, and then try to make progress from that. So
qualifying is such a unique setup in Formula E. I mean, it comes with challenges. So why have mistakes been made in quali and I'm thinking particular of Marrakesh?
There comes Evans. Where's he going to come out with regards to everyone else? I think Mitch Evans is too late.
Was that okay?
We didn't get the lap timing. Crossed at 0-0.
Guys, you're kidding me.
To be winning in general and doing well is almost two things. It's one, to be clever on what you do on the car, but it's also to be able to deliver basics correctly, consistently. And sometimes it's about the second. It's about, okay, we have a car that we know is performing well, but we also have to do our basics correctly. And the thing about quali is that you don't have 2 attempts, it's only one. So if for whatever reason all of the bits that needed to be in place for your quali lap went there, you just mess it up as much as we saw in Marrakesh. It's not a tiny error. Sometimes the tiny thing can make it into being last or not.
We've now had our quali. We're about to start the race. Just talk about the atmosphere and the tension before we start, and also during the race as well, because it's, when I watch you guys, you're obviously very focused, but basically as soon as the race starts, you become absolutely laser sharp focused on what it is you're doing. Just explain what it's like for you both as you're now watching the race unfold.
I would probably say you're nervous before a race. I think it's focus. It's trying to think, okay, this is my last few minutes before I can send something to the car. Let's make sure, as I was saying earlier, that we don't forget anything about the basics, and that there isn't something fundamentally wrong that's going to make it to the car. Because as we were saying earlier, if there's something wrong on the car, the moment it goes green, there isn't a chance we change it. So those few minutes before the race is really about making sure that your basics are there, and then on top of which everyone has put all their most clever things on as well. So once it starts, it's similarly to as we were saying earlier about approaching the race week with the task list. So we know every single one of us during the race what we should be looking at. So again, it's the same, because it's the moment where you don't have time with all the pressure to think about, oh, how about if I do this or that now? You have a list of very clear things to be looking at. And again, it's about keeping communication with Josep at all times. And it's about tracking the few things that you need each of us to track during the race.
And Josep, of course, you're the one on the firing line. You are the one at the end of the speaker, if you like, to the driver. Your job is often very tough, I think, because you're the one having to stay calm when very often the driver is losing their head slightly.
Watch the damage.
Terminal, mate. I'm out.
Try to keep going.
Mitch Evans has trouble too.
Yes, that's a pretty good statement, a pretty accurate statement. Yes, so as soon as the race starts for me, is as you were saying from the outside, it looks like we are fully focused. Yeah, that's it. Just my ears are listening mainly to what Mitch is saying, but also to what anyone else from the team has to tell me. We have a bit of a protocol so that not the 20 people that have a radio don't try to talk at the same time. So within the protocol, there's Cristina and there's Julian, our strategy guy. There's Phil Charles, who would be the main people that would be talking to me, but there's also controls and whatnot. And what I try to do at all times is get the information from Mitch, dissect it a bit. Quite often there can be frustration, there can be bits that we are not able to fix, but if there's any problems or any setting changes that we can start thinking of, obviously everyone else is listening, but that helps me start a second conversation maybe with Cristina to prompt her to start thinking, okay, let's think of alternative settings for this to try to make life easier for Mitch, or we're going slow, we're not recovering enough energy, let's think of what we could do to try to be better. And that would be happening live, so we have different channels that we can talk with or without Mitch, or we have a channel for Cristina and I, and that's what's happening. That's why we are fully isolated in front of our screens. Quite often at the end of the screen of a race, whether it's gone well or not, I turn around and realize the amount of people I've had around me all the time. I hadn't noticed at all. For me, it was Cristina on my right, Phil Charles on my left, and I know Julian is on the other side of the screens if I need, and that's everyone that I need to know about for the race. And Mitch is going around, yeah.
But when you do talk to the driver, obviously because the radios are also open, you have to be quite careful about what you say and the way you communicate it. So do you have codes?
Yes, we obviously don't want to give away everything that we've worked hard for to our competitors. So for most of the things that all the cars, because no one has telemetry, everyone needs to relay back energy, everyone needs to relay back battery temperature and any other settings. So pretty much everyone around the paddock has come up with codes. That's, if you hear any of the drivers saying a bunch of numbers or numbers and letters halfway through the race, that's a code for something. And then likewise, so the codes come from the driver to us, but then when it comes to tuning systems and settings, we have certain keywords for certain systems, just because we would not want to let everyone know that we are doubting about something, let's say, and give away that could be a weakness for us. Or if we're setting up, let's say we're about to try and attack the car in front, we'll try not to discuss it openly on the radio. We'll have a few key words that we'll use to prompt Mitch to do it, and he would say, okay, I'll try it. And so that's what we try to do. It doesn't always work like that. It's happened before that we've tried to use the code 2 or 3 times. Things start going pear-shaped and we just say, okay, forget about the code. We are doing this. Give me the number of laps. Give me the energy number. Because at the end of the day, what's any of the clever tricks don't count for anything if you don't make it to the end. So that has to always be the number one priority.
How does it feel when you get a good result? Obviously, we've had race wins, we've had podiums as well, but are those the only time you get a really, warm feeling, or have there been other times where something has worked really well? So, I mean, you've both had your big moments of celebration. So, Josep, you were, your first, let's talk about first win.
Final lap. Let's go for it.
Mitch Evans through the final corner to win the Romy Prix for Jaguar.
Yeah!
Thank you guys. Thank you so much for the hard work. You guys are awesome.
I guess it's pretty good that the way you've introduced this as saying, yeah, that was the biggest accomplishment for us. But before that was race 6 in season 5. But before then, we had some very big accomplishment moments, although we had not made it to the podium. But I think that the very good one was Riyadh, the first race with the Gen 2 car, where I think we started 8th or 9th. We made 4 or 5 positions. We were racing at a very good pace. The car was obviously reliable, good. We proved there that we had a really good race car, and we could validate all the new tools required to race with the new rules, with a time-based race. And that we will always remember that race, and also together with Mexico, where we saw the Nissans getting it wrong. We saw the 2 Nissans in season 5 on the final lap that they had not accounted for the extra lap. And although on that race we finished, I think it was an 8th or 9th, because we had qualified badly, so it was not a great race weekend, but in terms of end of race feeling of getting, okay, that you see that on your side, everything that you have been working really hard for a number of months, you are proving it, that it's working properly, and that you're actually doing it better than some others. And then if we just fast forward to Rome, that was another race where we had to manage a number of things. So within the event, we had last season, up until that point, we had big problems in qualifying. We changed a little bit our approach. We made sure that the basics were right, and bang, we put it P2. And then it was time to race. We were racing Lotterer, which is a really good driver, on a DS. That was a really, really good car. And okay, up until then, we knew that we had good race tools. We knew that we had a good car, that we could approach the race properly to have a good outcome. But it was the first time that we were able to actually do it for real, and that there was a big result on the line. And yeah, just those, well, it was 45 minutes of racing plus 40 minutes of pit lane time. But that afternoon was really, really good, how we were executing things as we had been preparing them. And that final yes, and even the lap, when we managed to do the timing, to get the timing right, so we slow Mitch down a bit, I think I tell him go for it, that's a big relief moment for me as well, because it's okay, up until now we could make a mistake and actually not finish the race from the lead, and this would have all been for nothing. But at that point we had confirmed, okay, it's about doing one lap now, and we're better on energy, we've got this under control. And then yeah, when we got to the checkered flag was the big okay, everything that we've been working so hard for all this time, ever since the Gen 2 concept started, that was all proven there, and it all came together. So it was great. Absolutely great.
A golden moment. And Chris, I mean, we love that moment with you smashing your mouse.
One of the most dominant races in the history of the championship. Mitch Evans wins in Mexico City.
Yes! This is how it's done, mate. Superb drive.
I couldn't stop it. I couldn't do anything different at that time.
Was it dead after that?
I don't know. I got another mouse. I don't know if it was the same or another one, but yeah, I had another mouse up and running, ready to go for the next race.
But was that your, I mean, we obviously, a race win is obviously always a brilliant moment. Was that the moment you were most happy about?
Probably not. I think that one, you were really happy about that one also because coming from Santiago where we were really sad at the end of that race because we thought it was one who could have won and we had unexpected problems in the car. So it was a bit of a relief after the painful one from Santiago to get that one. But yeah, there've been some other ones. I can also remember the one in New York last year where we were fighting for the title and we were starting, I think it was P13 and we finished P2, that we didn't actually see it coming. So that was one that from starting very far at the back you were thinking, I'm probably not going to go to the podium today, and you ended up on the podium that day. So that was one that I remember quite a lot as well. And even the last one that we had, so in Marrakesh, where again it's a very painful day where after you qualify you think, okay, well, let's go through the race, but we're starting at the very back. And again, it was one where we didn't make it to the podium, but it was a mega result. So after that one, it was, as Josep was saying, it's at the end where you go back home on the plane thinking, well, we've executed it, the race the best we could, and we've actually demonstrated again that we have a car that is really good.
Just talk to me about what you think about some of the new tracks that have been proposed also for season 7. We've got places like Cape Town and Rio, these places being banded around. What do you think about some of these places?
Bring them on. it's
Is there anywhere you really like to go?
I think both of them sound very good, Cape Town and Rio. I would definitely sign up for them. From the more technical side, is new tracks are good for everyone because if no one's been there before, it really then is when good teams can show why they are better. It's not only about the car that you've homologated and the hardware, if you have any hardware limitation because the way you homologated the car, you had to take a compromise. Then when you go to a new track that no one has any data for, is where really it really shows who's able to do all the homework quickly, to do all the validations that you need, that normally you would have done based on previous year's data, and to see who's definitely adaptable and quick, which is what you need to be quick in Formula E.
And Chris, is there anywhere you're keen to go?
No, I love where Formula E takes us. There's very creative places that they like to take us to. So yeah, definitely anything. Bring it in. Let's go anywhere, please. Let's not stay at home for long. Don't mind where. Let's go racing.
Exactly. No, I think we all feel the same. Guys, thank you very much. Everybody is desperate to get back racing as soon as we safely can. Josep, Cristina, thank you so much for joining us and giving us your insight. I hope you've enjoyed listening to all of those pearls of wisdom. Of course, you can watch this on YouTube or on Instagram and download the podcast from any of your usual podcast providers. So that's it from us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
One of the most dominant races in the history of the championship. Mitch Evans wins in Mexico City. Yeah! Mitch Evans through the final corner to win the Romy Prix for Jaguar.
It is how it's done, mate. Superb drive.